John, it looks from the thumbnail like the limited Hangout business is a little bit rough these days. People are remarking that certain social engineers are needing to work the pole to make ends meet. How are you today, John? Welcome to the new time slot where you've taken over for Sunday with Charles. Charles will be with us at 8 p.m. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Yeah, this limited hangout concept is something I didn't know about until you taught.
John, it looks from the thumbnail
Hang on.
like the limited. You got your browser up there.
It's
a little bit rough these days.
I always think I get the tab. I mute all the tabs. I always miss one. I apologize.
Okay.
All right. So you taught me about this limited hangout a year ago. I thought this meant the patron-only hour.
I hate it when you say that. Please do not say that. We
but that's
do
my own
not want
ignorance.
to
That's okay.
associate our product with an
That's my
intelligence
ignorance.
operation.
It's my
Please
ignorance.
stop saying that.
All right. My ignorance was I thought I just took the words at face
Are you going
value.
to say it again? Don't.
What?
Do
I just
not.
took the words at face value. So
got
I just figured that just means, those of us who are interested in playing 12-string guitar, we'll be getting together over here in this room. We'll be in
limited
room
group of people
210.
hanging out. No.
Right, that are interested in, just this kind of stuff, like the Vegas shooting or, whatever it is that we would be talking about. But then you explain, no. This is actually like a tactic. This is like a method. This is a thing. And you explained it. And I think, a number of us who didn't know this were kind of stunned. And we covered this in this Web of Deception series that we've been doing. We spent about the last 6 months looking at these types of techniques explicitly. Like that's been the whole purpose of the series, is to look at these social engineering tactics and methods and who's behind it and stuff like that. And so we were doing a separate series on that. And interestingly, sort of one of the key characters of that whole dialogue ends up smack dab in the middle of this assassination story. And I think we see him up on the pole. Looks pretty comfortable too in the thumbnail. Like this isn't the first time. But I thought it was important to share this stuff with the audience because we got a lot of new people watching that are not familiar with this. And they're like, well, what are they talking about? What is this limited hangout? This just sounds like a bunch of sour grapes, and it's not. And so we're going to be getting into things like the State Department's GEC. We're going to talk about FBI UCOs. We're going to be talking about things like catch and kill. We're going to be talking about things like gaslighting and poisoning the well. These are the techniques that you've taught us that I learned from you, right?
Identity duplexing.
Identity duplexing. And you taught us this, but in the Web of Deception kind of, series, it was in that realm. I felt that it's really important for this audience to understand this because what I'm seeing is what you told us about. And I'm like, I'm recognizing this again. And I wanted to see, are you recognizing this again? Because if
Absolutely.
You're probably the most sensitive. So for people who aren't familiar with Jason's background, Jason started this Crowdsource the Truth enterprise, or whatever we want to call this, 7 years, almost 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, right. And brought together a group of independent journalists, people like Charles Ortel, me, Lee Stranahan, David Hawkins, who passed away, a number of other notable people that you've done shows together with. And it's been sort of independent investigative journalism, and you're bringing together all these different people, and you're running around the streets of New York and interviewing people and bumping into Norm Eisen and Alan Dershowitz and asking these guys the most awkward questions imaginable. It's like a more sophisticated version of the stuttering John, who are you and why are you famous? So I love it. To me, it's just amazing watching you do this. But I think that the important point here is that you've had more experience as sort of the target of lawfare
Exactly.
than anyone. And this is another technique, but sophisticated. Hang on. And as a result, you kind of were forced to figure out this stuff. And you studied all the JFK stuff. So I wanted you to talk about, in fact, if you open up the deck, I've kind of have, ignoring key evidence, gaslighting, poisoning the well. I want to show this to the audience and have you lay this out for people so they understand these are techniques. And if you see these things happening, it's not that they're ignoring John Cohen. That's not what this is. And
Right.
I need you to help people understand that. So let's just go through a couple slides in the deck. And I'm going to turn this over to you in like slide 3. So you're going to see that it basically sets you up. So this notion of the limited hangout, the sort of the bottom line up front is, if there are people who are genuinely interested in getting to the bottom of what happened 2 weeks ago yesterday, why would they ignore key evidence? Why would they do certain things that just seem odd? Like if there's kind of interesting evidence, why would you not want to look at that? And subsequently, let's turn the mirror back at us. Is there evidence that we're not evaluating? Right? Is there anything that's been brought to the forefront that we're saying, we've already decided it's not that? Is there any? So that's what we're going to explore. All right, so let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you some examples. So here's an example. Here's a guy I've had absolutely zero interaction with ever. Okay?
He came out guns a-blazing, huh?
Despite the fact that I made a video right after the election that was kind of a tribute to him, highlighting his testimony
You
in
told
Atlanta
me about him. I didn't know about this
Rudy
guy until
Giuliani.
you did that. Yeah. I thought you liked him. That's why I was surprised by this. I was like, wait a minute. I thought he somehow had dealt with this guy before, and he's coming off like something weird.
So back then, this is right after the election, Johann Holton, Pulitzer, is the guy that comes forward and says, hey, I'm the guy that came up with the technology and patented it such that when you put cash into a vending machine, it knows if that's really a $10 bill or if that's fake.
Wow, that seems like he'd be rich.
I think he's rich. I think he's wealthy. So that's his backstory and his premise is that he has the patent for like some sort of OCR technology. It's like micro OCR. And
Commander? What's he a commander of?
Self-styled as commander. I guess he likes to call himself that. Isn't that what Xenu used to call himself? The guy who wrote
that's a
all the
little
Xenu
weird,
books?
isn't it? He's the commander.
They refer to him as commander, so maybe he's into Scientology.
Oh.
So, yeah, who knows, dude? All I know is that the claim to fame is he invents the technology that when you put the money in the scanner at the grocery store, if you put cash in the machine, sometimes it spits it out and it says, no, that's not good enough for me, right? That doesn't look like a 20.
It's the litmus configuration.
Okay. So he comes out of nowhere with this post. Now, again, I made some stuff and I tried reaching out to him to have him on the show as a guest back in 2021.
Right.
One of our viewers, one of our patrons who supports the work, reached out to and tried to set it up. He blew it all off. So now out of nowhere, Johann Polton sends this post and says, hey, John, instead of posting short momentary clips on replay, how about you come on with me live and let's review your suggestions? I have a few guests lined up to join you who are featured in your videos. Let's all explore this together. This is the, fifth request now?
Well, it's like, hey, you want to come on an ambush?
And so my first thing is like, so wait a second, the short momentary clips on replay.
Yeah, no, he's giving you notes. I like that. What is he, the producer?
But I guess he's not familiar with the limitation of Twitter. So the limitation of Twitter is 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So my videos are 2 minutes and 18 or 2 minutes and 19 seconds. So that's the limitation that I have in Twitter. So if he wants to deride Twitter, he's more than welcome to, but that's the limitation that I have is I'm only allowed to post 2 minute 20 second videos. Now he wants me to come on live with a bunch of people, and he says, this is the fifth request. And I said, I haven't seen any requests from you. Why didn't you send me a DM? This is the first one. And by the way, why are you acting like an asshole? And so the net of this is there are no other posts
He
from
didn't write back for
Jovan.
that? I'm surprised.
There's nothing. Right. There's no other posts from him. There's no DM. There's no email. And he
But
says
did he
this is the
respond to this?
time. No.
Did he respond?
No.
He
And
didn't.
a whole bunch of people jumped down his throat and said, dude, what are you talking about? We follow you and we follow Cullen. And this is the first time you've ever mentioned them. You're full of it. All right. So this is an example. Now, then you pointed out.
One thing before we move off of him. He does have some patents here. He's got the code trigger telemedicine session, a system and a method for audiovisual response to retail diagnostic product. It sounds like he's telling the truth about that. A lot of patents.
Diagnosing Zika? How's he diagnosing Zika? Sounds to me like he's a cutout. But that's just me. That's just me.
That's a lot of patents.
Yeah, he's like a patent kid, right? He's one of these kids who just figures out a way to say something,
could be a patent troll.
Yeah.
Oh boy, Hawkins would dig into this guy. I really miss David Hawkins. It's such a shame.
Yeah, he would be digging into this. So Jovan comes out of the woodwork. He wants to challenge me to some sort of a debate. And my question is, well, so why do you seem so worked up? Which evidence are you having a problem with, and why are you angry at me? What the hell am I doing? I'm just...
Well, he's telling you how to do your show. He doesn't like your format. Instead of doing it the way you do it, why don't you come do what I'm trying to influence you to do? That's social engineering right there, by the way.
Absolutely. So let's go to the next slide, because the next slide is going to get into one of the most obvious techniques is this method where they just ignore key evidence. They just ignore it. They pretend it's not there. This is the gorilla isn't just in the room, it's sitting next to the elephant. Okay, so you've got an elephant and a gorilla, and everybody's pretending like there's not an elephant and a gorilla in the room. And that's a little bit weird. Is ignoring key evidence part of the limited hangout approach? So this is, I think, this is the zone. This is the most obvious. The other things are going to be a little bit more sophisticated. I'm going to ask you to explain this to the audience. We're going to get into poisoning the well, the gaslighting and all that. But this is just so easy. An example would be back in March of 2020, the guy who put the mapping system together that Johns Hopkins was using, that's me, shows everybody there's not 10 people dead in Hong Kong, there's not 10 people dead in Shanghai, there's not 10 people dead in Beijing, and there's nobody dead in Vietnam. And all these independent journalists
just ignored that.
Seems
big. Seems important. At
Seems
least
like if it's coming from the guy who built the damn thing, and you can click on Hong Kong. You don't. I'm not writing.
No. It's got nothing to do with you. It's coming from the same data they're using, the World Health Organization. You're just pointing it out.
And you can click on Hong Kong all by yourself. You don't have to write code. You can click on Shanghai. You can click on Hong Kong.
You also don't have to take your word for it. It can be independently verified, what you're saying.
That's what I meant to say.
You are not a factor in this.
That's why I was incognito. I'm not a fact. It's not about me. Look at the map. The map says there's not 10 dead in Hong Kong. But Mike Adams ignored that. He didn't think that was interesting. I thought that was like, why would you not think that's interesting, Mike Adams? I thought you're the guy who figures everything out. Chris Martenson ignored all my posts about COVID, everything. I sent stuff to Chris Martenson on COVID, but he ignored everything about it. Everything that I sent. You can pull up Twitter and you can search for my name and you do the advanced search and you can do from me to Chris Martenson. You'll see a whole bunch of tweets. He completely ignores all of them, every single one. Right. So this is this method, this ignoring key evidence. And it's something that you and I were used to from the Las Vegas shooting, where nobody wanted to talk about the helicopters. Right. And that's why I'm really grateful to Brett Weinstein. Brett Weinstein had me on Dark Horse podcast a week ago today. And one of the things he said was, dude, your work on this helicopter thing was kind of wild. And that is like Overton window stuff. That stuff nobody will admit. Helicopters in Las Vegas. Right. And so the fact that Brett kind of stuck his elbow through that Overton window, thank you. I'm appreciative of that.
There's another move of the Overton window that he did, John, just by acknowledging that, he was one of these members of the so-called intellectual dark web that they don't really ever refer to anymore. But he's in the zone of, obviously we've got corporate news where people are paid millions. Then we've got the podcast world. And in terms of that, he's up there in the sphere with Joe Rogan and, sort of all the big guys, where you and I are still in the less well-known zone. So acknowledging that he and likely other people in his circle have seen that footage, have been aware of it for years, and are only just mentioning it right now, is pretty interesting in and of itself, isn't it?
And I think it's a very insightful point because Brett doesn't live in a bubble. So, right, Brett's brother is the guy who manages the money for Palantir, right? That's Eric Weinstein. Right?
He hated it when I called him on his cell phone. He just was so fixated on how did I get the number, and he wouldn't speak to me.
I understand. Yeah, I understand.
Very on the spectrum. I understand
that
it too.
Is wild. And the fact that you're able to do it, and the fact that people like Dershowitz actually answer and then say, okay, or who was it? It was Vindman. One more question. Okay, just one more question. Just one more question. I'm stunning reporting that you've done. But let's come back to this. Come back to the deck, because I want to talk about these bullet points before we have to go to the patron-only portion of the show. For those of you who are new watching what we do here, last show we did, Jason was evaluating, and do not flip to this, please. Now, I don't want to get any.
No, I won't.
Right, we're not going. All right, so Jason was evaluating the death photo of the shooter on the roof, and YouTube immediately makes that an 18 or older. Now you've got to sign in, meaning you can't just watch it on your TV in the living room. You got to log in with your password and all that monkey business. A lot of people don't
download it.
Yeah, people don't want to do that. So we have to tiptoe around what we can do and what we can share here. And so what we do is we do about 30 minutes, 25 minutes here on YouTube. We kind of lay out the agenda. And then when we go to this patron-only portion of the show, we've got video footage. So tonight we're going to be looking at the 4K footage that Dave, the DJ, or Stu, the DJ, or somebody, Dave Stewie, the DJ, Stewie Dave, shot some footage. We finally have the 4K stuff, but he's got overlaid Chiron crap. So Jason's going to give us the was it or wasn't it. And I got another asterisk on this thing. The kid turned his phone into the FBI.
Yeah, that was
Okay,
very interesting. Well, how many other people were compelled to do that? Did he do that voluntarily, or did they make him?
I think he went to I'm trying to get him on the show tomorrow night. So we're trying to get him on the show as a guest. One of his buddies is following us and follows me and DMs me on Twitter. He's with him right now at his birthday party.
Oh.
So we're trying to get
birthday.
Yeah, so Dave Stu the DJ, we're trying to get him on the show for tomorrow night. It's his birthday today. One of our followers is with him right now. Knows and is extending the invitation and saying, hey, Jason and John really want to have you on the show tomorrow night. So
that's great.
Expect that. And so we're going to get to hear from him, when he turned on the phone. I'm sure then you'll be able to get the version that doesn't have the letters and crap on it.
Well, but it's an interesting point, and that tipped me off as well, that he said that he had given the phone to the FBI and then checked it, that nothing was changed about it. I don't believe that at all. They could change metadata, they could change anything. But it's interesting that they got it. How many people have given their phones to the FBI? Because we see hundreds of phones in the air. We've only seen dozens of videos.
I think they do. It's an intimidating technique. When we get to the patron-only portion, we're going to get a chance to preview it. All right, so we're going to get to watch it with the crap on the bottom of the screen. It's not as bad as the bad one, but it's 4K. We're going to get to see, and you're going to get to see the reaction, the police reaction, the Secret Service reaction at the front door of American Glass. He walks right up to the Harley Davidson that's parked there.
Yeah, I saw that. We get the license plate almost.
She's got some great footage. So we're going to be reviewing this critically with a critical eye. Jason's going to be looking for technical aspects. If the FBI doctored this, Jason's going to find it. Jason, NYU Film School, 3D Spider-Man, on and on and on. Cannes Film Festival, American Guild of these guys. Jason's the lecturer who teaches people this shit. If anybody's going to find it, it's going to be Jason. So if it's been doctored in any way, Jason will find it. What we're looking for is this version of helicopters. We're looking for one dot of light. All right. So if Jason can confirm, if they doctored it, they didn't doctor this, or it's doctored and this is crap, then we got to jettison it. Right. So this is where we are. I mean, we're evaluating evidence. It's too soon to tell what's definitive, especially if we know the phone was in the hands of the FBI, right? So we know, for example, why do we say this? We know for a fact that the audio evidence that was presented from Las Vegas was doctored. Okay, so the audio that we hear from SWAT.
Right. You did a great job figuring that out.
We have another room with a broken
problem
window.
with the stereo imaging, right, of left and right audio. It became monaural in one section. That made it quite clear that it had been through a video editing program, and whoever put it out. It's always tricky getting the audio tracks when you start messing with stereo to mono. I agree with your assessment of that. That was very well determined. I also want to add one thing about this FBI taking the kid's phone. Something that a lot of people might not know about the JFK assassination. There's all the people, like everybody's getting names right now. I am talking about this overbite crooks versus regular crooks. There are all these people who are at the JFK assassination, like Babushka Lady and everything like that. Babushka Lady is Beverly Oliver. She is the woman who was seen standing just on the opposite side of where the grassy knoll is, and she got a very clear photograph looking at the limousine from the opposite side that Zapruder was standing. And she was dating a guy who worked for, I forget if it was Kodak or Bell Howell or something like that. She had some prototype Super 8 camera. So people initially questioned her because they said, oh, that camera wasn't released until whatever date, and you're using it on November 1963. But it turned out to be true that she was dating somebody who worked for the company. She had this camera, and she shot a reel of film. And the woman is still alive. I believe she is. I interviewed her a few years ago. She's in her 70s or 80s, and she said that they followed her home, and they said, hey, were you the lady with the camera? And she said, yes. And they're like, we need the film. We're going to, develop it for you or something and give it right back. And she never saw that person or the film again. And she said she was young and naive. And she even admitted, I think she was 18 at the time. And she said that when the FBI approached her on the street, she had marijuana in her purse. And she was so afraid they were going to arrest her that she just gave them the film and they left. And she was like, thank goodness. And she never saw the film again.
1963, and she was smoking weed.
Well, because I think she was a singer maybe at the Jack Ruby thing. She knew Jack Ruby as well. So she's in the whole kind of like swinging night scene, and weed. I guess it was the 60s. Well, who knows?
You've been showing us these parallels and have been suggesting that they don't really update the technique book. It's
not much.
Keep going back to the same playbook. Even with COVID, we're going to need a patsy. It's like, really? You guys are that not creative?
They're effective tactics, right? I mean, if bashing somebody on the head with a hammer works, they're going to keep doing that.
Yeah. Why try celery? It's probably not as effective. All right, let's go to the next slide. Before we go to the patron-only area, I want people to hear this summary from you. So let's go to this next slide.
Before we do more summaries, I think it's important that we let people know this is not just something that Wikipedia or Perplexity or Jason Goodman or John Cullen made up. This term and this technique in tradecraft, this espionage tactic, is born out of the mind of Richard Nixon, and the actual term limited hangout came about and is heard on tape as Nixon is speaking to members of his cabinet that the Washington Post is starting to uncover what's happening with Watergate. And Nixon says to him, look, I'm concerned about having all this information hanging out. And I think it was Haldeman or somebody says, well, we could reveal this, and then people will be so shocked by that we could sort of cover up this other part of it, the worst part of it. And Nixon said, you mean kind of like a limited hangout? And they said, yeah. So it's basically when you tell a true thing to someone that is intended to be so shocking and revelatory that it causes you at once to become engrossed in that shocking thing, and to also presume, well, this person wouldn't tell me this damaging thing if they weren't on my side. So this causes me to believe that this is a trustworthy person for revealing something that seems to be damaging the people who tried to kill Trump are enemies, right? But in fact, they're hiding the actual evidence. Like, in other words, if somebody says, hey, they towed this van out of the neighborhood just right as the shooting was happening, and that van belongs to crooks, and there were explosives in the van, and we found this explosives company, we got to invest this explosives company. Yeah, okay, maybe there was a van in the neighborhood, and that's true, and maybe that van is owned by the shooter or somebody involved in this, but was it filled with explosives? The only people who have told us that are the FBI, and I've been speaking to people in various law enforcement agencies. I'm trying to get an answer from a bomb squad person, but so far everyone agrees that it seems odd to just remove a vehicle suspected of having improvised explosives from a residential neighborhood without first evacuating the neighborhood and bringing in certain equipment to contain a potential explosion. But there's a lot of ways this technique can be applied, John.
Well, gaslighting, if anybody's ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you know what that's all about. Poisoning the well is a technique that you know very well because you at one point were borderline sleeping with the enemy, or, on the couch, but, sharing a bathroom, which I find awkward.
You don't need to categorize it
Can
like
you
this.
tell
For
people-
about
all right, so
3 months, when I started Crowdsource the Truth, I did it because my previous business, 3D production, was no longer viable and I was losing money. So when I've had money and started, startup companies, you really hire people and pay them. But when you have no money, you need to improvise. And so I met George through YouTube, like most people have in the past 2 weeks, and he seemed interesting at first. George
Curious
Webb.
George the monkey? George Webb. George Webb, the independent investigator who we saw at the water tower in Butler, PA? That George Webb?
Yeah, and he initially seemed compelling and interesting, so I interviewed him and we started doing shows together, collaborating on YouTube voluntarily, just like you and I do. I don't work for you, you don't work for me, neither of us employ each other, we don't even share the funds, which is why I always asked Crowdsource the Truth viewers to also visit subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen and patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, because if people enjoy the reporting, they can choose to sponsor both of us, one or the other, or whatever it is. And this has been a great system for me and the other co-hosts that I've shared it with. I've pioneered the technology that allows us to do this from a business perspective, but I hadn't yet worked all that out when I first started collaborating with George. He had a YouTube channel, I had a YouTube channel, and we were essentially just guests on each other's shows. But he, to build that, I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go around with you and I'll be the producer. And since I need a hotel room and you need a hotel room, I'll pay for the hotel room and we'll get, 2 beds. And we're like college buddies starting a startup company. He crashed on my couch for 2-3 months. We traveled around. John, see, it's like you make these cute jokes and people take it the wrong way. I have a 1-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom. And for the 2 months that George was a house guest, yes, he would use the bathroom. And then when he wasn't in there, I would use the bathroom. Because what do you do when you live in one apartment and 2 people in there? So
that's what I'm
there's
saying.
certain
It's an
ways you
thing.
have of putting things that are,
But
I
he's
would edit the
6'8".
copy.
He's a big man. He's a 6'8" guy. His head is about the size of Montana. It has its own orbit, right? It has its own gravity, right? His head has its own gravity. Stuff is orbiting around there. The point is, a couple days ago, he tells you he's in Butler, PA, and he says, "And here we are."
Well, he doesn't
at the
tell me. He tells the world. He tells
that's what I mean. He goes on video and he says to everybody, "Hey, I'm here in Butler, PA, and here's the iconic water tower and the low-slung building over here." But he's not at the Butler water tower that's next to, he's at the different water tower somewhere. And when we had a local on, we had Tommy, the local guy with the pickup truck who went down to the venue. He said, I have no idea where that water tower is. That water tower's not in Butler. So it's like, well, why would you do something that odd? Now, you had experience with George Webb in the past with these strange things, but I'm seeing like this new generation, guys like Benny. Benny went out there, flew his drone around, mentions the water tower.
Let me pause you a second, because we got a lot to talk about all these guys, and we're going to need to do it in the sponsor exclusive segment. Before we get into Benny, because that's a big one, this is not the water tower, but this is George dropping another false, this is a limited hangout. So it's true that Corey Comparatori worked for a plastic company. I guess this is it, JSP. I did see on Corey's LinkedIn that he is some sort of engineer with a plastic company, but his LinkedIn said that he worked there for 29 years. George went to this company, and he says Corey worked there for 33 years. And people might say, oh, so what, Jason? Don't be such a stickler for details. George is working hard, and you're just busting his balls. No. 33, first of all, is a number that we've spoken about a lot, not because I'm into numerology or witchcraft or superstition, but because it is a number that is frequently associated with Freemasonry. And I believe when we see it in places that appear unusual, it's frequently used as a steganographic message, a message that is hidden in plain sight. And so, based on what we know about George, or I should say based on my pure opinions about George, which I have formed by observing facts and details in the public domain. You might look at these facts and details and come to a different conclusion, but I'm sharing my opinion about this limited purpose public figure, and I'm speaking about him in this way because his brother will file documents in court about everything that we're saying right now, including excerpts from this video, because that is part of his tactic to get us to not talk about the fact that George wants people investing Corey Comparatori's work at the plastic company, which I feel very strongly has nothing to do with him getting shot there.
It's the Macha Benassi play. This is the poisoning the well. So this is, if you go back to the slide, that's the poisoning the well. This is where they take an aspect of the story that is true, and they start to, and they put in the disinformation.
Right.
So in the case of COVID, there were Wuhan military games. It does take place, but he introduces this Macha Benassi cyclist angle. There's nothing to do with what's going on with the story, and takes people down this rat hole that just goes nowhere. Same thing here. He's taking the plastics company thing that's absolutely true, but he's changing the dates. He's changing the story. He goes to the wrong water tower. It's like, why are you poisoning the well? Well, that's part of the limited hangout.
Let me answer the why.
It's a limited, yeah.
I tell you what, we're going to answer the why in the sponsor exclusive segment, because we got to get over there. And if people are interested in what we're talking about, this is a cliffhanger. If people are interested in what we're talking about, please sponsor the show. Join us right now on either subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen. You can sponsor John there, or on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Someone's asking about Caleb Maupin. I've heard of him before. He's a friend of Lee Stranahan's. I believe he is in the American Communist Party. I don't know very much about him. But we'll be right back. We're going to keep talking about the limited hangouts and these various intelligence tradecraft techniques that we've been forced to learn by being subjected to them. Come with us for this sponsor exclusive segment. You're not going to regret it. Thanks for watching, everybody.